Hi, I'm Bella and I love reading. I've been talking about books online for kind of a while now, but mostly over on Twitch, where I host a monthly live stream called Books with Bella. I love chatting about all of the books that I've read recently, books that I'm hoping to read, and just all things book related. Since we recently closed out 2024, I wanted to share a recap of my year of reading with you here on YouTube. So it is great to meet you and really lovely to be here. Thank you so much for watching. Welcome to my 2024 reading recap. Thank you for being here. I'm so thrilled to talk about books with you. So I really love to end the year or start the new year with a book recap and take you on a little tour of all of the books that I read over the last year. This is my second year doing a reading recap, and yeah, I'm very excited to take you through it. So let's go for it. Thank you for joining for my reading recap. So first up, I'm going to take you through some of my statistics, just general statistics of my reading in 2024. All of the statistics that I'm grabbing are from Storygraph. I use Storygraph to track all of my books and reading. So I use it to track the books that I want to read, to rate the books that I have read, and to track my daily reading. I literally log the pages that I read every single day. And what's so cool is that if you use Storygraph all year round, or for any part of the year, I guess, you don't have to use it every day like I do. But if you use Storygraph, at the end of the year, you get a little recap with your reading statistics for the year, all of the books that you read, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of this presentation, particularly the statistics, is just pulled directly from Storygraph. So in 2024, I read 71 books, which is a lot. It's more than I planned to read. I think I set a goal for myself to read 40 books. So I really went over that. I wasn't sure how many books I would read this year. I had a lot of travel planned and stuff like that, but 71 is pretty good. And my average rating was 4.43. These numbers are both very similar to the numbers that I had at the end of last year. I think at the end of last year, I had read 74 books or something like that. I was also in the 70s, and my average rating was, I think, 4.45 or something. So 2 years in a row, I've read a lot, and I've really liked almost everything that I've read. And I think part of that is because, I love books. I can be critical of books. I'm always happy to offer a critique, but I find that I don't know. I really do like a lot of books that I read. I have had a very positive experience overall with the books that I read. I don't typically dislike books that I'm reading. Also, I do feel like in the last few years, I've gotten really good at knowing whether or not I will like a book and only reading books that I think that I will like. Part of that is I don't really want to waste time with books that I don't enjoy. I like most genres, so already I'm kind of set up for success there. There are not a lot of genres that I don't like. But the genres that I know aren't for me, I just don't try. So I read a lot of books and I liked a lot of books. These are the most common genre tags that showed up in my reading. So again, this is another stat from Storygraph. And the genres here are tags in Storygraph. So LGBTQIA is not necessarily a genre, but it's a tag, a genre tag in Storygraph. So of all of the books that I read, which was 71, 30 of them had the LGBTQIA plus tag in Storygraph, which is kind of hilarious. And also makes perfect sense for me. I read a lot of queer books this past year, or books that had some sort of queer representation in them. I tend to be, kind of drawn to queer books, so it makes sense. My second most common tag was contemporary, so more modern books as opposed to romance was also it doesn't surprise me all that much that romance was high on my tags, because I actually have found, especially over the last few years, I have found recently that I actually do like romance. I'm just kind of picky about the romance that I read. But yeah, I read a lot of romance books in 2024. I also read a lot of young adult books and a lot of fantasy books. I think in some ways, I think those tags were a little bit influenced by, I definitely got a lot of really good book recommendations over this past year. So I read a lot of books that my friends had recommended to me or for book clubs and things like that. And I feel like I know a lot of people that read a lot of YA and fantasy. But I don't know, like over 15 books with the YA tag, that is like more than I expected. So good job me. And also a lot of fantasy. So, but yeah, those are my genres. This is my story graph, which I think is so cool. This is a feature, I think, unique to Storygraph because it's like in the name. But it is, as the graph here says, it is a mood map of your reading. Lighter books push the line up and darker books pull the line down. I feel like, first of all, my line is generally pretty high. So that's good. But also I feel like this is often how my story graph looks throughout the year, where like my books get darker as the year goes on. So I don't know what I read. I must have only read light books in January. I must have read a couple heavy or dark books in February. And then like February, March, April, and even kind of May, June, July, my books stayed relatively light. And then August hit and I was like, that's it. We're reading dark books. And so and then I read some lighter books in December, but most of those, like, you know, August, September, well, more like September, October, and November, I was reading darker books for sure. I think this is like such a cool and unique little graphic. I really like it. Yeah, I don't know. And then, okay, this is maybe my favorite piece of data from Storygraph. There's a lot going on here, but this is basically like all of my reading throughout the entire year from month to month. So the blue line is the number of books I read. And this is, again, there's like one data point for each of these per month. So it's the number of books that I read each month, the number of pages that I read, and then the number of minutes listened. So it's capturing both like physical / ebooks that I read and also audiobooks. So my biggest, like highest number of books read was in July and August. In both of those months, I read 10 books, which is quite high. And then my lowest like month for reading was in March, and that was when I was traveling with my partner in the UK, and I just felt like I was so busy. I didn't really want to read because I was so focused on the trip, which was great, like a very good thing to be doing. But yeah, that was my lowest reading month. And then there were 2 months that I didn't read any audiobooks, but only 2. Like every other month I was listening to audiobooks at least a little bit, which is kind of interesting. I tend to mix my reading up and I'll have some physical books and some audiobooks. So I don't know, it's kind of cool to see that there are only 2 books or 2 months that I didn't like listen to a single audiobook. And then I think there weren't any months where I wasn't reading like a physical book. Like every single month I was reading something. Yeah. And then I guess there were only 2 months. This is another sort of interesting thing. Also, it's kind of goofy that like the dots for January are all in almost the exact same spot. Like the books read and pages read and minutes listened were like at the same number in January, which is sort of goofy. Anyways, there was only 2 months, I think, where, I guess 3 months actually, where the green line was higher than the red line. So I was listening to audiobooks more than reading physical books. I don't know. I just think this graph is super interesting. I love seeing like what my reading looked like throughout the year, and like when I was listening to a lot of audiobooks, when I was listening to or like reading a lot of physical books, when I was reading a lot of books versus not a lot of books. I don't know. I just think it's neat. I also started the year and ended the year reading the same number of books in a month, which is kind of neat. Anyways, that's that graph. I just think that's an interesting one. And then I can't remember if I have more data or if we're jumping right into the talking about books. So let me see what my next slide is. Okay, yeah, here we go. Now let me officially talk to you about books. Whew. So, okay. I have a lot of slides in a row that are like 3 books of something. So we're going to actually start talking about books. I am not going to tell you a ton about each of the books that I show on here just because we're on slide 6 out of 30. I have a lot of slides to share with you. And I don't want to make this take like 10 zillion hours. So we're going to go through these relatively quick, but if y'all have any, I love things in threes. I don't know. A three just is good for me. But if you have any questions or comments or anything to say, please feel free. Share your thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts on the books that I read. I would also love to hear, like, when we are going through stuff like top 3, if you have a top 3 that you want to share, or any of the categories or the book superlatives that I share later, if you want to share yours, I would love to see them. Please feel free to share. Always happy to hear your thoughts. Anyways, out of the 71 books that I read, here are my top 3. So Babel I put them in threes, but I don't necessarily rank them like number 1, number 2, number 3, because that's too much pressure. So these 3, but not, I don't know necessarily in what order. I don't know. Babel by R.F. Kuang, Man-Made Monsters by Andrea L. Rogers with illustrations from Jeff Edwards, and The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. These are 3 pretty different books, I would say. Babel is, I think, like historical fiction with some like fantasy elements. I would say it's quite long and it's pretty heavy, but it's phenomenally written. R.F. Kuang is incredible. Man-Made Monsters is horror, but it is short stories. Also, Man-Made Monsters is like categorized as YA. It is a young adult book. And it's really, really good. And it feels very different than most of the books that I've read because it's horror and short stories, but also the short stories are related. They're not like independent short stories. They come together, which is very cool. And then The 7-Year Slip, totally different than the other 2 books, is a romance book. And I loved it. This book was, I just loved it. That's what I'll say about that. But yeah, these are my top 3 of the year. Also, it was incredibly hard choosing these top 3, so I cheated and I did top 3 part 2 because I read so many books that I really, really loved that like really, really stuck out to me. So here were 3 more that really stuck out to me. Chlorine by Jade Song, weird book, loved it, super weird, super incredible. It's like one that I'm still thinking about, you know, it like really stuck itself into my brain, you know. I should read 7-Year Slip this year. Yes, you should. It's so good. It's really, really good. I was really surprised at how much I loved it. Not that I didn't expect to love it. It just was, I loved it even more than I thought I could. I don't know. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I really liked this book. I've read some other books by Becky Chambers, but other than this, I have only read the Monk and Robot series, which are very short and I would say very unique. They're very like chill fantasy kind of deal. And The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is space. I feel like it has like space opera vibes. I don't know what that means really, but that's the vibe that I get. It's in space, it's queer as hell, it's fantasy. My cat just jumped on my desk, so sorry for the shaking camera. It was so good. Also, like, a thing that I keep thinking about this book, and I think it's true about everything that I've read from Becky Chambers, is that she creates these worlds that are just so comfortable and queer and interesting, and I just want to exist in them. I loved it. I loved that book. And then also The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I loved this one. I think I read it in November, I want to say. It was super interesting. I really liked all the characters. It had like mystery vibes. It was so cool. I read this one really fast because I was so sucked in, and I was so impressed by the atmosphere created in the book, and I also just loved the unraveling of the story. It also had multiple timelines, which I really loved, and also there was like one character in this book that was so queer that I'm still thinking about them, you know what I mean? Anyways. So yeah, those are my top 3 part 2 because I could not pick just 3 that were my top faves. Oh, I love Becky Chambers. Also, I think The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is a series. Like, I think there are others, and I've only read the first one, but maybe this year I'll read more because I just really loved that world. Anyways, okay, now continuing on. Oh yes, my next category was top 3 of book club. So these were 3 of my favorite reads in book club. The way that I picked for this category was partly books that I just loved in book club, but it was also partly like books that I loved to get to read with book club. And so what I mean by that was, in some instances, actually in all 3 of these cases, these were books that I probably wouldn't have picked up myself. Like, I wouldn't have picked for myself, but I got to read them for book club, and I was so glad for that. And also, these books kicked off some really, really incredible conversations and discussions in book club, which also made me want to mention them today. So not only were they books that I really, really enjoyed reading, they were books that I felt like my experience of reading them was enhanced because I got to read them with book club and with other people. So first of all, I want to say a huge shout out and thank you to everyone who made suggestions for books to read in book club. We had a really lovely year of book club. I think we read 10 books this year, I want to say, possibly. And I had such a fun time. I loved the books we picked. I loved the conversations that we had. So thank you to everyone who suggested books. Huge thank you to everyone who participated in discussions. And a small plug, if you would like to join book club, you are welcome to. We host it, or at least like we organize it in Discord. And currently this month, we are making some decisions for some changes to book club to make it a little bit easier for everyone to participate if they want to. Book club, the thing that will never change about book club is that it is totally optional and like you're allowed to come and go as you'd like. So if you are interested in reading books with some friends and you want to join the book club, feel free to join Discord. You have to give yourself the book club role to access the like book club section of Discord, but you can do that yourself. And then once you're there, we have a couple different things going on. We have like our, book club where we pick books to read together and then discuss them together. But we also have spaces to just like recommend books for one another, ask for book recommendations, talk about books in general, like on your own time, however you want. And also like do buddy reads together. I'm currently working to plan a buddy read of the new Hunger Games book when it comes out in March. But yeah, if you are interested in joining book club and also interested in sharing your opinion on how book club would work best for you in 2025, definitely check out Discord. Because yeah, it's been really fun so far. Anyways, back to the books. So my top 3 of book club are Feybound by Sarah El Arifi, Welcome to the Hunam Dong Bookshop by Huang Bo Rum, and Imogen Obviously by Becky Albertelli. So Feybound is like fantasy and also queer. I am pretty sure this one was recommended. Yeah, this one was definitely recommended by Bookie. And I know Bookie had a lot of like really good things to say about it before we read it. And it was so good. It was like what I want. It was the romantasy that I wanted. Like we talked about this a little bit in book club, but sometimes I struggle with romantasy as a genre because I feel like in some romantasy, the fantasy is sacrificed for the sake of the romance. And there's like the romance is quite good, but the fantasy is lacking for me. That's just my personal experience. And I felt like Feybound was not that. Like the fantasy was so solid and the romance was also so solid. And I really loved that. I also felt like the fantasy world was like different than a lot of fantasy that I had like experienced so far. It's one that I just like, it wasn't on my radar, but I loved reading it and we had some really cool discussions in book club. Welcome to the Hunam Dong Bookshop was another one that I just like didn't really know much about, probably wouldn't have picked up for myself, but was such an interesting read. It was very like chill and casual and kind of wholesome and talked a lot about like life real life struggles, sort of. And that was another one that led to just like such cool conversations in book club. I feel like this one was one where a lot of the folks who were in book club discussion had like different things that stood out to them about the book and different reads on different characters or different moments. So it was really cool to read that and like compare notes basically. And then Imogen obviously is, I think it is like, I don't know what it's definitely YA. And it's sort of like a queer, I don't know, I guess you could say like queer self-discovery kind of book. Which I think that type of book, like queer self-discovery, can be very hit or miss for me also, because I don't know, sometimes it just doesn't hit for me. Sometimes it feels but this one felt so good and so right. And as someone who like identifies as bisexual, there was a lot in this book that I really related to, and it felt really, really special to get to read this and then chat about it with other people. Like, it was just a very special book. I really loved it. So, but yeah, those are my top 3 of book club. Once again, thank you, book club. I love y'all so much. Thank you for reading books with me. Okay, my next category is the top 3 audiobooks that I read in 2024. So for this category, I wanted to pick books that not only were books that I liked that I happened to read as audiobooks, but books where the audiobook was particularly good. Like, not only was the book good, the audiobook was great. You know, does that make sense? So I really enjoy audiobooks. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I'm like always down for an audiobook, but I feel like I particularly enjoy audiobooks when there's something really stand out about them. And I felt like all of these books had that. So the 3 that I picked are The Story of More by Hope Jaron, Gorgeous Gruesome Faces by Linda Chang, narrated by Elaine Wang, and The Age of Magical Overthinking by Amanda Montell. So the first and last in this page, The Story of More and The Age of Magical Overthinking, both of those were read by the author, and I loved that. Sometimes I feel like books where the audiobook is read by the author can be hit or miss, because sometimes authors are phenomenal writers, but maybe not phenomenal audiobook narrators. But I felt like both of these authors were phenomenal audiobook narrators, and hearing their voice tell the story, or read out loud their own book, just really added to it. Also, interestingly enough, both of those books, so the ones on either side here, both of them were nonfiction books. So The Story of More is about climate change, and it's sort of like a history of things that have happened in the world that have had really significant impacts on climate change, and then also ways looking forward that we can help combat climate change. I highly recommend this book. It was really good. It wasn't all that long, and the audiobook was great. And even though it was a nonfiction, I really understood it super well via audiobook, which was huge. And The Age of Magical Overthinking is also nonfiction. It is about... Let me read to you what it says from Storygraph, because it's been a while since I read that, and I'm like, how do I summarize this? It's about like... how do I, it's like it's about thinking, but it's okay. Let me see what this says. Magical thinking can be broadly defined as the belief that one's internal thoughts can affect unrelated events in the external world. Think of the conviction that one can manifest their way out of poverty, blah, blah, blah. In The Age of Magical Overthinking, Montell argues that in the modern information age, our brain's coping mechanisms have been overloaded and our irrationality turned up to an 11. So it's about like honestly, I felt like a lot of it was about like thought fallacies, and each chapter sort of like took apart a thought fallacy that exists in our world. I don't know how to explain that better, but I highly recommend this book. I thought it was so interesting. And another instance of the author read their own book, and I think she did a great job reading the book aloud, and it really added something to the story. And to me, that's my cat's tail. Sorry. He's he wants to talk about this book too. To me, the Age of Magical Overthinking audiobook sort of reminded me almost like of a podcast. It felt very like casual and friendly, and that style of writing and also like audiobook narrating even though the book had a lot of information to share, it felt super approachable because of the way the book was written and read, which was very cool. Anyways, loved those. And then Gorgeous Gruesome Faces. This is like a horror thriller kind of vibe, and it's also like K-pop related, which is really fun. It was just like a very fun horror book, and I enjoyed the book a lot, but the narrator, it was so interesting. The narrator did such a phenomenal job capturing emotion and really like tense and scary moments. And that's all I will say about that. It like really added to the tension of the like scary horror thriller moments to be listening to it on audiobook. I loved it. Incredible job. Anyways, those are my top audiobooks. Next up, I had my top 3 nonfiction. And for this, I picked Fen, Bog, and Swamp by Annie Proulx. This is one that I read in December. It's literally about fens, bogs, and swamps, or like types of wetland that are peat producing. So fen, bog, swamp, those are all wetlands that produce peat, and also their role in climate change and the full title of the book is Fen, Bog, and Swamp: A Short History of Peatland Destruction and Its Role in the Climate Crisis. This was super interesting. I felt like going into this book, I knew nothing about peatlands and like this type of wetland, and I exited this book like since finishing this book, I have like started spewing wetland facts to all of my friends. They're probably so bored of me because every now and then I'm just like, did you know that in like that blah blah blah, and I'll just like say some random fact about wetland and peat. I don't know. This book was just like super interesting and I really enjoyed it. Also, I have Refusing Compulsory Sexuality, A Black Asexual Lens on Our Sex-Obsessed Culture by Sharonda J. Brown. I think I read this one back in June or maybe July, but I read it in the summer. And this one was super, super interesting. I read it because I wanted to have more like books from an asexual perspective and lens in my reading. What I think was so interesting about this book is that it made a lot of points that were, I think, relatable to like anyone just existing in our, as it says, sex-obsessed culture. This book was so cool. It was really interesting. Highly recommend. And then the third book I have on this page is The Other F Word, A Celebration of the Fat and Fierce, which I have Angie Manfredi. Angie Manfredi was the like editor because this is a anthology, and it is an anthology of like short stories, poems, and even some art, all centered on the topic of like existing as fat people. It was a super, super interesting book. I read this, I don't remember what month this occurred in, but I read this for my friend Lily's Read Fat Positive Readathon, and it was a recommendation from Lily, and it was super good. Y'all know I love an anthology, and this one just like really stood out to me, and it was I really appreciated all the like variety in the book. It was really good. But yeah, those are my top 3 nonfiction. Next, I have my top 3 graphic novels. Also, I didn't read all that many graphic novels this year. I feel like I have read more graphic novels in the past. So I think last year, I guess, in this year, I think I want to read more graphic novels because I was like, where did all my graphic novels go? Anyways, my top 3 were Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, Wash Day Diaries by Jamila Rouser and Robin Smith, who was the illustrator, and Homebody by Theo Parrish. I loved these. They are all gay and they're all great. Definitely highly recommend all of these. Fun Home and Homebody I own, and Wash Day Diaries I borrowed from my library, but I might consider buying that one because the art was so good. It was like really phenomenal. And it centers on like, I don't know, it had such good friend vibes. Like, yeah, I don't know. It just really captured the like friend family energy. I just really loved it. Anyways, those were my top 3 graphic novels. And then my top 3 book covers. I had a lot of really beautiful books that I read this past year, so this was also a challenging category for me. But for this one, I put Pocahontas, which that's how you pronounce that word. It does not look like, it looks unexpected, but it's Pocahontas by Tayi Tibble. Never Whistle at Night, which is an anthology edited by Shane Hawk and Theodore C. Van Elst Jr., and The Age of Magical Overthinking by Amanda Montell. I feel like there is a trend here in the style that I like of book covers, which is like these bright colors and like very distinct colors and this sort of like blocky art. Like, I don't really know how to explain it, but I feel like these have like kind of a similar vibe. But I loved these 3 book covers. I just thought they were so beautiful. I just really liked them. But yeah, these are my top 3 book covers that I read or saw in 2024. And then here are 3 books that I would reread. On a Sunbeam by Tilly Walden. That was actually a reread for me in 2024, but I would still reread it once again. It's so good. Legendborn by Tracy Dion. I loved this book, y'all. It was so good. I would totally read it again. And it is book number 1 in I think at least a trilogy. I think there's a 3rd book coming out this year, I want to say. And I am considering rereading Legendborn and then reading. I don't know that I need to reread it because I do actually still remember the story quite clearly. It's just so good. And I feel like if I read it again, I would pick up on more detail. But I'm considering rereading it before reading the 2nd and then 3rd book. Maybe. I haven't decided. I don't know. And then Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. Loved this book. So good. Just so good. I would totally read it again. Okay. And then my best main characters category. So for this, I feel like a lot of books that I read have main characters that I like, because I think that's like, I think it's hard to read a book if you don't like the main character. I think there are, of course, exceptions to this. Like sometimes a book you're sort of like intentionally not supposed to like the main character, and those can be really fun. But for this category, I wanted specifically to pick books where not only did I like the main characters for one reason or another, I felt like the sense of a character was captured very well. I don't know how to explain that better, but these had something beyond just like, oh, I like this character. I felt like I understood the characters. So it was like best main characters, where best means like best captured, you know? Anyways, okay. Dear Wendy by Anne Zhao. I think there are basically like 2 main characters in this book. And I don't know, this book just captured their like young college vibes so well. Like I felt like I was in the room with the main characters and I really loved them, and I just thought they were captured super well. I liked them a lot. The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. Also not similar characters at all. Super different characters. Really different vibes. But same deal where like I felt like I understood the characters really well and I really liked them. Even though I would say the characters in The Pairing were a bit flawed, which I enjoyed, I just felt like I understood them and I liked them. I liked their vibes. And then Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. This has multiple main characters because we get to meet all of the sisters. This was kind of a sad and challenging book, so just a fair warning. But this was one where, I felt like it was so impressive because even though we're following multiple characters, I felt like I understood them so deeply and I understood their like sister bond super well. Just really liked the way that the main characters were captured. And then, also... I threw this category in for fun. Hello, gay people. Are you listening? And gay as in the bra. LGBTQIA plus people. Are you listening? Are you queer? Listen up. I liked these books, queer people. I liked a lot of the LGBT books that I read, but these books I'm still thinking about in a gay way. 1, The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. I'm still thinking about those characters. They're gay in a way that I really liked. 2, How to Bite Your Neighbor and Win a Wager. Gay vampires. Look at the cover. Just look at the cover and tell me you're not gay. I mean, anyways, Loved it. The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. There's not like the main storyline is not like a gay love story, okay? But there are gay people in this book and it has vibes that are so gay. I can't explain it, but it is queer. This is a queer book. So for the queer people, I'm talking to you. I read a lot of other books that I would also recommend to queer people because I read I think I read 30 books with the LGBTQIA plus tag. I read a lot of queer books, but these ones I'm still thinking about in a queer way. So that's for you gay people. Thank you. And then most impactful. So these are books where the stories really stuck with me and really impacted me. Either they made me think, like some of these just like philosophically made me think. Some of these got me like politically thinking, like they impacted me in some way. They like, I don't know, like woke some part of me up. So Martyr by Kaveh Akbar, highly recommend. No Country for 8-Spot Butterflies by Julian Agwan. This is a collection of like essays, essentially. Super, super interesting. Really, really interesting. And then Dearborn by Hassan Zenadine. Also really, really, really interesting. It's a collection of short stories. Really loved these. And each of these books had something about them that I finished it and I felt like there was a new part of my brain turned on and thinking. They really, really impacted me and stuck with me. I'm still thinking about them a lot. I'm pretty sure that brings us to the end of my sets of 3. Let me just confirm. Yes. Okay. Now I have book superlatives. So this is similar, but instead of having sets of 3, it's just going to be one book. Some of these are simple, like this category that I'm starting with. This is sort of one part, just like a continuation of the 3s that I did last year and this year. And also partly inspired by, I've seen a lot of like book superlatives on like TikTok and social media. And I've seen a lot of people do them a lot of different ways. So I have like a lot of variety in my book superlatives. Some of them are just like categories, like most, whatever. And then some of them are very specific categories that I think some of these are just like a general thing, like longest book. That's just factual. And then some of them are kind of silly categories that I made up myself. So I hope you enjoy. Welcome to my book superlatives. First up, longest book. The longest book that I read in 2024 was Babel. I feel like I said Babel earlier, but I remember learning that it is pronounced Babel. Babel by R.F. Kuang. This book is 545 pages and worth every page and then more. I literally, I think I remember finishing this book and thinking, that could have gone longer, which is wild because usually my chief complaint in books is, oh, that could have been shorter. No, this could have kept going. It was so good. It was so good. And literally every moment of every single page, I was engaged, which is huge for a book that is 545 pages. Like, what the hell? Longest book, incredible. My shortest book, technically, was Pocahontas by Tayi Tibble. This was a book of poetry, and it was just under 100 pages. It was 96 pages. And what was very cool is most of the poems in this book were like 1 page or like 1 to 3 pages. So there was a lot of poetry, and this was really fun to like pick away at and read a couple of poems at a time. And it was just super fun. This was very approachable poetry. If you're considering getting into poetry, but you're like, I don't know about all that, try this book. Definitely try this one. It was like very relatable and approachable and like modern, which was fun. The book that I read the fastest, so the book that I spent like the shortest amount of time reading, was When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nhi Vo. This is a second in a series, but it's a kind of unique series where the books are related, but they're not necessarily like following one plot. I don't know how to explain that better. But technically this is the second in a series, but they're not like the exact same plot. This one was so cool. It's a relatively short book. I think it's maybe just over 100 pages, but it's physically smaller. Like the number of words per page is like less on this book than on some others. So it's an ideal book if you're trying to read a book in one day for whatever reason. I think when I read this one, I remember it is 125 pages. So it's on the short side, but truly the book is like small. Okay. I think I remember reading this there was a prompt in the Pedal Pages reading bingo that we did over the summer that was to finish a book in one day. So I intentionally tried to read this in one day, and it was perfect for that. So I don't know if you ever need to do that. But yeah, this one I took the least amount of time from start to finish reading. And then the book that took me the longest to finish, that's supposed to say finish. I am not above typos. Will I fix that in post? Probably not. The book that took the longest to finish was The Mountain and the Sea by Ray Naylor. I read this over 34 days, which is on the longer side for me. This is a science fiction book, and I think the reason that it took me a while to finish was that there was a lot going on, and I kept sort of like I kind of had to take this book slow to really digest everything that was happening. So I took my sweet time reading this one, and I really enjoyed this book, but it took me a while to finish. I really had to like pick away at it. And then, okay, here where we're getting into my here's where we're getting into my fun categories. The book that I need all of my friends to read immediately. I don't normally tell you that you have to read, like I know how it is. Sometimes when people pressure me to read a book, I'm like, ugh, suddenly I don't want to read that book. Like, I like recommendations, but sometimes when people are like, you have to read this, it kind of puts me off. So I very, very seldom, like very rarely will I say, you have to read this, but hear me when I say, you have to read this. I loved this book. This is Man-Made Monsters by Andrea L. Rogers and Jeff Edwards, who is the illustrator. There are some illustrations in this book. It's not a graphic novel or anything, but there's like an illustration for each chapter, or for each story. It's a collection of short stories, and the illustrations are so cool. So if you have the chance to get the physical book or an ebook, you'll see the illustrations. So I highly recommend doing that over the audiobook. The audiobook is probably also great. So if you listen to the audiobook, just at some point in your life, look at the physical book. Anyways, all of my friends have to read this immediately. This is horror, short stories, and YA. We also saw it earlier in my top books of the year. This is one of my favorite books that I read in 2024. There are distinct short stories, but they all come together in kind of an interesting and slightly, maybe not unexpected, but really wild way. This spans a huge amount of time, and each short story has like a different main character, and all of the characters are so cool. I cannot say enough how great this book is. I need you all to read it now. Thank you. Okay. My next category is most likely to disappoint you before the end of the book. Sorry. And for that category, I have Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. This is romance, and basically my thoughts on this book were I really, really, really enjoyed it until I got to the last, 100 pages, and then I was disappointed. I didn't hate it. I just was disappointed. Like, it was so strong, and then it went a direction that I did not want to follow. I just was disappointed. I don't know. It felt... So this has a lot of like fanfic vibes in it. I'm personally not a fanfiction reader. I don't have any problems with fanfiction. I've just never gotten into it. So what was very interesting is that if you are a reader of fanfiction, you'll see a lot of stuff that's very fanfiction-y in it, I think. Again, I don't read fanfiction, but there was a lot of fanfiction like culture in it, which was cool. But I feel like the book felt like a romance book for the first 75% of it, and then it felt like fan fiction for the last 25% of it, and that switch up I was not prepared for, and I did not love, is what I will say. Yeah maybe if it was just like really, it felt like fan fiction the whole time, maybe I would have been on board, but it felt like two different stories, and I wasn't ready for it. So it might disappoint you, or it did disappoint me. Most likely to make you cry. The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is fiction, fantasy, and romance. It is a sort of like a, not necessarily a retelling, but almost like an expansion of the story of Achilles. And here's my note on this book. I know the story of Achilles. This can't possibly hurt me. Wrong. That's how you should feel about this book. You'll cry. I don't think, in fact, I offer you a challenge. I would love to meet someone who hasn't cried while reading this book, because I don't think that's possible. That's what I'll say. I read that on Thanksgiving and I cried hard. Yeah, I cried so hard after I read this book. It's so good, just to be clear. Absolutely phenomenal book. But boy howdy, you're gonna cry. That's my take. So good. So cry. My next category is the best to bring to the beach. And I will admit that I probably created this. I created this category because I wanted to put this book, I created this category for this book. And I read this book at the beach, but something about this book just really it just makes sense at the beach. Okay. I don't know. I can't explain it. It just does. So The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is romance and magical realism. And I read this super quickly at the beach. Like I picked it up at the beach and then I couldn't put it down. And it just felt so right to be like sitting outside with the sun shining on me and the wind and the waves and this book. It just was right. This is a really good beach read. I highly recommend it for that. My next category is most likely to dash all of your expectations or most surprising. And I have Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This is fiction. And this book isn't even like, I have definitely read stories that get like wilder and weirder. But this was just like, I think this book, there are characters in this book that I think operate in unexpected ways. And so it was just very surprising and unexpected to me and really good, but very, very surprising and unexpected. I want to read Murata so much. Really good. I definitely recommend this book. I think it's just not possible to go into this expecting what you're going to read. You know what I mean? Yeah. This one was surprising. My next category is the book that I most want to see made into a movie. And for that, I put Severance by Ling Ma. This is science fiction and dystopian, and worth mentioning, this is completely separate, nothing to do with the show Severance. Not at all related, totally different, completely unrelated. And the reason that I put this book for this category is that I am such a huge fan of like a dystopian show where it's the end of the world and the population is gone. Like I love seeing that. Like I think a lot of like zombie shows and movies are like that, or like Station 11 is a show that is, I just love a show where like the world has ended, everyone is gone, and you get to see like normal real world places overgrown and fallen apart. And this book has that setting. So it's not like the most original type of show or movie to ever exist, but I still would love to see it because I always want more of that. And I really enjoyed this book. And it has like, I don't know, like I would watch this movie. I don't know. I just liked it. I would watch this movie. Severance by Ling Ma. I really liked it. My next category is the book that will make you need the rest of the series immediately. And for that category, I put Legendborn by Tracy Dion. I have read Station 11, yes, which is partly what I was thinking about when I put Severance on here. I read Station 11 and I watched the show and I really liked both. And I feel like this could do well too. You know what I mean? I really like Station 11 in the book and the show. Really liked it. Also, hi spiders. I'm having a cat intermission. I'm just gonna scratch his back really quick because he wants some attention, I think. I read the book in one night. Yeah, that was a very fast read for me as well. I couldn't stop. So yes, the book that will make you need the rest of the series immediately. I have Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is the first book in, I believe, a trilogy. At the time that I read the book, the first and second books had been published, but the third book was not yet published. I think the third book is being published this year. And I read this book and was so like, I need to know what happens next, that part of me was like, I have to pick up the second book now. And then I forced myself not to so that I have made myself wait to read the second book until the third one is out or almost out, because I will be so like, I will lose it if I read the second book and then I have to wait for the third book. Like I don't know. This series is so exciting. So yeah, just be warned, if you're planning on reading this, be ready to read the rest of the series. And then my next category is the book that will make you texting me, what the hell did I just read? Question mark, exclamation, exclamation, question mark, exclamation. And for that category, I have Immaculate Conception by Ling Ling Wang. This book is fiction and horror. And I wrote here, I honestly feel like I shouldn't say anything. Just read it. If you know, you know, / if you read her first novel, you know, maybe. This is Ling Ling Wang's, I think, second novel. She also wrote Natural Beauty, which was another horror book. And Natural Beauty was a wild ride. And Immaculate Conception, a wild ride. I think I read this book in like 2 days because I couldn't put it down. I like read it on a train. I might have even finished it in 1 day. I read this book on the train in Spain, and literally like I couldn't stop reading it because I was just like, what the hell is going on? So that's how you'll feel if you read this. I highly recommend it. It's weird as hell. It's super interesting. I think Ling Ling Wang is just amazing and super talented, and I really loved this book. Boy howdy, it's a wild ride. But read it and then text me, what the hell did I just read? And then my next, and I think my last book superlative is the hottest, fire emoji, book. And this was the book that I felt like was the hottest and sexiest. You know what I mean? So if you are not a romance person, maybe you won't like this book. This book, all right. This is Zoe Brennan, First Crush by Laura Piper Lee. It is actually, fun little plug, it will be published in 3 days on this upcoming Tuesday. So if you're looking for a book to read, go to your local bookstore on Tuesday and look for Zoe Brennan, First Crush by Laura Piper Lee. I am not in any way like affiliated with this book. I'm just excited to have gotten to read the arc and tell you about it because I loved it. Okay. This is romance. It's gay. And here's my sentence that I wrote about it, which I really think says it all. There is an all lesbian threesome with blindfolds. Do I need to say more? And that's how the book starts. I'm not even spoiling anything. That's how the book starts. Okay? Hot lesbian winemakers being lesbians and also hot. And also there are other characters too. But it's hot. It's good. I just really liked the romance in this book. I am kind of picky when it comes to spicy books and like level of spice. I am down to like, I don't personally, and this is not a do whatever you want. Okay. Do whatever you want. I don't really read smut. I don't typically read books that are like mostly only sex. It's cool if you do. I don't care. Do what you want. I just don't. So I don't typically love books that are super, super spicy. So this is not going to be like the spiciest book ever written. And there's a lot of plot in this book that has nothing to do with sex. There's plenty of time in between the sex scenes. But the spicy scenes I just felt like really, really good and really, really fun. And I really liked the like romantic tension. And I just felt like I could really feel the romance between the characters. It was very enjoyable. So yeah, anyways, hottest book. And I think, yeah, that is it. Thank you for reading with me. And thank you for listening to me yap about all of my 2024 books. That concludes my 2024 recap. 2024 reading recap. Yeah. Thank you for an incredible year of reading. And here's to 2025 full of even more amazing books and lots of shared recommendations and lots of good buddy reads and lots of good book club reads and more queer books as always. Yeah.